Sarah adjusted the straps of her heavy backpack, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders as she glanced down at her daughter, Emma, who was tugging at her hand, excitement in her eyes. The air was thick with the hum of a busy airport, the echo of announcements, and the hurried footsteps of travelers, each person racing toward their own destination. Seattle. That was where they were headed. The place Sarah had been dreaming of for months. A fresh start. A new beginning. She was leaving behind the small town they had known, and the memories that haunted them. The old house. The old life. It was time to build something new, something better for Emma. Something where she could give her daughter the life she deserved, free from the weight of past mistakes. "Mom, look! We're going to fly on a plane." Emma's voice broke Sarah's thoughts, her small face lighting up with joy. She wasn't yet old enough to understand the complexities of their journey, the emotional weight of leaving everything behind, but Sarah was determined to shield her from the harsh realities. Sarah gave a tired but warm smile. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." They moved through the crowded terminal, heading toward the gates with all their belongings, juggling travel bags and paperwork. But Sarah's mind wasn't on the logistics. It was on the future she had promised her daughter. She had no idea what awaited them in Seattle, whether the dreams she had been nurturing for years would become a reality, or whether they would crash and burn like so many other plans she had once made. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this time, things would be different. The boarding process was chaotic, as expected. People were rushed, pushing and shuffling, anxious to get to their seats. Sarah noticed the signs overhead for first class but kept walking, focused on finding her seat in economy. But something strange happened. In her hurry, she found herself and Emma following the flow of passengers into a section she never meant to be in. "Mom, are we in the right place?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with confusion. Before Sarah could respond, a flight attendant was by her side, gently tapping her on the shoulder. "Excuse me, ma'am. This is first class." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. I'm sorry. We must have taken a wrong turn," she stammered, embarrassed. But the attendant just smiled kindly. "No worries. It happens sometimes. Would you like to stay here?" She was taken aback. No. Actually, we have a few empty seats up front," the attendant interrupted smoothly. "Would you like to take them?" "It's no problem at all." Sarah blinked, confused. First class? How could they be here? They were supposed to be seated in the back of the plane, in the cramped seats that had already been purchased months ago. But before she could protest, the attendant had already ushered them into a spacious seat, and Sarah, hesitant but intrigued, sat down beside her daughter. As she glanced around, she tried to make sense of the situation. This was far too nice for them, too luxurious, too out of place. Emma, however, was enthralled by the plush surroundings. "Mom, this is like a hotel room." Sarah chuckled softly, but her mind was still racing. Could this really be happening? They were strangers to this world, people who didn't belong in the upper class. But the attendant was gone now, leaving them alone with their thoughts and questions. As she tried to settle her nerves, she noticed a man walking down the aisle, a tall, well-dressed figure. He seemed to exude confidence, the kind of person who was used to this level of comfort. He smiled warmly at her and Emma, his eyes briefly meeting Sarah's. "I think I've seen you before," he said, his voice rich with charisma. Sarah blinked. "I'm not sure," she answered, though something about his presence felt oddly familiar, as if their paths had crossed before in a different time. He took a seat across from them, his calm demeanor immediately putting her at ease, even if just a little. "I'm James Crawford," he said with a grin, extending a hand. "It's not every day you see someone in first class who seems so out of place. What's your story?" For the first time that day, Sarah felt a sense of normalcy. She smiled back, though a bit awkwardly, and shook his hand. "I'm Sarah. This is my daughter, Emma. We're headed to Seattle. Just looking for a fresh start." James's smile softened as he nodded knowingly. I get that. Seattle's a great place for new beginnings. And you're not out of place here, by the way. Sometimes life just surprises you. Sarah glanced at her daughter, who was already whispering to herself, enchanted by the luxury around them. Her heart swelled with a mix of pride and sadness. Emma didn't know how much this fresh start meant to Sarah. James settled back in his seat, giving them both a moment of peace, before turning to Sarah again. You know, he continued, I'm a single parent too. It's not easy raising a child on your own, but somehow it's always worth it. You just keep going, day by day. His words struck a chord in Sarah's heart, resonating deeply with the weight she carried. She hadn't expected to meet anyone on this plane who could truly understand her journey. But here he was, a stranger, yet somehow a kindred spirit. You're not alone in this, Sarah, James added, his voice sincere. I've been there. And in that moment, Sarah realized that this unexpected encounter was more than just a mistake. It was a reminder, a sign that the universe had a way of bringing people together when they needed it most. The flight took off, and as Sarah looked out the window, the world below growing smaller, she felt something inside her begin to shift. She wasn't sure what was coming, but for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to face whatever it was. With Emma by her side and the unexpected kindness of a stranger, maybe, just maybe, this new chapter could be everything she had been hoping for. And maybe, just maybe, this plane ride would change everything. As the plane soared higher, Sarah gazed out the window, her thoughts drifting like the clouds outside. Emma, her little daughter, was already engrossed in a pair of headphones, watching a cartoon on the small screen in front of her. The sudden luxury of first class had, for a brief moment, swept away all her worries. But deep down, she couldn't shake the sense of being out of place. This wasn't the life she knew. The world she and Emma had come from was much smaller, more confined, filled with struggles, sacrifices, and missed opportunities. But here, in this vast space above the clouds, there was something different, something unexpected. James Crawford, the man who had greeted them so warmly, seemed completely at ease, his presence effortlessly commanding the space around him. He leaned back in his seat, his eyes closing briefly, as though he had long been accustomed to this lifestyle, to the kind of world Sarah felt so distant from. And yet, there was something about him, something human, something raw, that made Sarah feel less alone in this strange environment. I didn't expect to meet someone like you on this flight, Sarah said after a moment, her voice almost lost in the hum of the engine. She wasn't sure why she felt the urge to open up to him, but there was something about his warmth that made it hard not to. I thought I'd be sitting next to some wealthy business type who wouldn't have the time of day for someone like me. James smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. I've heard that kind of thing a lot in my life. The whole not belonging thing. But it's all just smoke and mirrors, Sarah. People like to make life seem like it's divided into neat little boxes, but the truth is, we're all just people. We all have struggles. We all have dreams. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Sarah found herself thinking about her own dreams, the ones she had put on hold for so long. She had been too focused on surviving, on getting by, to let herself imagine what could be possible. Seattle was supposed to be her second chance, but sometimes, even with hope in her heart, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was just trying to outrun her past. "What's your story?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "You mentioned you're a single parent, too." James chuckled softly, his gaze drifting out the window. "Yeah, I'm a single father. My son's in college now, but it wasn't always easy. I used to be just like you, Sarah, trying to figure out how to balance work, life, everything. But somewhere along the way, I realized I had to start living for something bigger than just getting by." His words struck a chord. She could hear the wisdom in his voice, the experience of someone who had been where she was, and had somehow made it through. "You don't seem like you've been struggling," Sarah said, a trace of doubt in her voice. "I mean, you're flying first class. You've got it together. James smiled again, a little sadness in his eyes. I've had my share of struggles, Sarah. You see the surface, the fancy flights, the suits, the business deals. But what you don't see is the years of hard work, the late nights, the missed birthdays, the times I thought I wouldn't make it. It's easy to assume someone's got it made when all you see is their success. She nodded, understanding all too well. It was easy to look at someone like James Crawford and think they had everything figured out. But the truth was, everyone had their own battles, their own burdens to carry. It was a lesson Sarah had learned the hard way, over and over again. She had done everything to make a life for Emma, and yet the weight of the world often felt too much to bear. But you made it, Sarah said softly, looking at him with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. I did, James replied, his tone more reflective now. But I didn't do it alone. I had people who believed in me, people who gave me chances when I thought I was done, and I never forgot that. It's why I try to help when I can. I've been lucky, Sarah, but luck is nothing without hard work and a little bit of help from the right people. Sarah looked down at Emma, her heart swelling with a mixture of love and longing. She wanted to be the kind of person who had it all figured out. She wanted to be the one who could give her daughter everything she had ever dreamed of. But how could she when she felt so far from where she wanted to be? What about you? James asked, his voice soft, bringing her back to the present. What's your story? What's your dream? Sarah hesitated, but then she took a deep breath. This was why she was here, why she was starting over. She had to be honest with herself and with him. I've always wanted to be a chef, she said, her voice growing steady as she spoke the words that had been buried inside her for so long. I have a passion for food, for creating something beautiful out of simple ingredients. I've always dreamed of opening my own restaurant, a place where people could feel at home, no matter where they came from. But it's hard, when you're a single mom. The dream feels so far away. James listened, his gaze unwavering, and for the first time, Sarah felt like someone truly understood. What if I told you that there's a place where you could make that dream come true? He asked, his eyes shining with an unexpected intensity. She turned to him, her heart pounding in her chest. What do you mean? I'm working on a project, James explained, a community center in Seattle that will include a culinary program. We're looking for someone to run the kitchen, teach others how to cook, and help them build their own futures. It's a place where people can get a second chance, just like you. Sarah stared at him, her mind racing. A second chance. A new beginning. It sounded too good to be true. Could this be the opportunity she had been waiting for? I don't know what to say, she whispered, overwhelmed by the possibility. You don't have to say anything right now, James said with a reassuring smile. But when you get to Seattle, reach out. If you're interested, we can make it happen. And just like that, Sarah felt the first spark of hope she had felt in years. The possibilities ahead of her seemed endless. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living. It was about finding her place in the world. And maybe, just maybe, she had found someone who could help her get there. As the plane touched down in Seattle, Sarah felt a strange mix of excitement and uncertainty churn within her. She had always dreamed of this moment. The fresh start, the new city, the hope that something better was waiting for her and Emma. But now that they were finally here, the weight of the unknown felt heavier than ever. They disembarked, stepping into the cool, crisp air of Seattle, and Sarah couldn't help but take a deep breath, inhaling the scent of change. The city stretched out before them, tall buildings, busy streets, and the promise of something more. It wasn't just a city that felt different, though. It was a feeling of a new chapter beginning, a chance for her to finally pursue her dreams. But how was she going to make it work? How was she going to turn this opportunity into something real? She glanced down at Emma, who was holding her hand tightly, her small fingers wrapped around Sarah's with a sense of trust and hope that only a child could have. Emma's wide eyes were filled with curiosity as they passed bustling crowds, and for a moment, Sarah wished she could see the world through her daughter's innocent gaze. full of wonder, without the weight of past mistakes or the fear of failure. "Mom, do you think this place will be fun?" Emma asked, her voice laced with excitement. Sarah smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I think it's going to be amazing, sweetheart." But as they made their way to the taxi stand, Sarah's thoughts drifted back to the conversation on the plane with James. Could that really be the opportunity she had been waiting for? A culinary program. A second chance to pursue her passion for cooking. It felt too good to be true, yet everything about James had felt genuine, his kindness authentic. "I'll think about it," she muttered to herself, just as she waved down a taxi. The drive through Seattle was beautiful. The city was alive with lights, people, and the sound of activity. But as they neared their new apartment, Sarah's excitement began to fade, replaced by a pang of uncertainty. The apartment wasn't much to look at. A modest building in an even more modest neighborhood. She had expected it to be temporary, but still, it felt like a step backward. This wasn't the life she had envisioned when she first made the decision to leave everything behind. Sarah forced a smile for Emma's sake as they entered the small unit. It had a certain charm to it, sure, but it was cramped and the air felt stale, like it hadn't been lived in for a long time. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse. There was a window that overlooked the city, but even that didn't do much to lift Sarah's spirits. It was just another reminder of how much work she still had ahead of her. Emma dropped her backpack onto the floor and immediately ran over to the window, pressing her face against the glass. "Look, Mom, the city's so big. It's like a whole new world." Sarah watched her daughter, her heart swelling with love. Emma had a way of seeing the beauty in everything, even when things weren't perfect. And maybe that was what Sarah needed to focus on, the beauty in this new beginning, even if it wasn't exactly what she had imagined. The apartment was small, but they would make it work. They had each other, and that was enough, for now at least. The next few days passed in a blur. Sarah spent her time unpacking, adjusting to the new routine, and trying to get Emma settled into her new school. It wasn't easy, but Sarah was determined to make it work. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. One evening, after dinner, Sarah sat down at the small table, the weight of the day settling in her bones. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her messages, her fingers pausing over the number James had given her. She hadn't reached out yet, unsure if it was too soon, but as she thought about the conversation they had shared, she realized that she couldn't let this opportunity slip away. She needed to at least take the first step. With a deep breath, she tapped the screen and sent a simple message. "James, this is Sarah. I'd like to talk more about the culinary program. When would be a good time for us to meet?" As soon as she hit send, Sarah felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. What if this wasn't the right move? What if she was getting her hopes up for something that wasn't meant to be? Her phone buzzed almost immediately, a reply from James. "Hi, Sarah. I'm glad you reached out. Let's meet for coffee tomorrow morning. I know a great place downtown. I'll send you the details." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the excitement building inside her, a mixture of hope and nervousness. She had taken the first step. Now, it was up to her to see where it would lead. The next morning, Sarah dropped Emma off at her new school, her stomach fluttering with anticipation. She hadn't expected to feel this nervous, but as she walked into a coffee shop downtown, the weight of the moment pressed heavily on her chest. She was about to meet James again, this time to talk about a potential future, a future that could change everything. She spotted James sitting at a table by the window, a coffee in front of him, his posture relaxed but focused. When he saw her, he smiled warmly and gestured for her to sit. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, his voice casual but with an undercurrent of sincerity. "Of course," Sarah replied, settling into the chair across from him. She felt like she was walking into a new chapter of her life, one that she had no idea how to navigate. But she was here, and she was ready. James looked at her with a kind smile. "So, tell me more about your vision. What do you see for yourself in the culinary world?" Sarah took a deep breath. This was it. the moment where she could finally speak her truth. "I've always wanted to open my own restaurant," she said, her voice steady but passionate. "A place where people can come together over good food, where everyone feels welcome, no matter where they're from. I want to create something that feels like home." James nodded thoughtfully, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made Sarah feel heard in a way she hadn't in years. "That's exactly the kind of place we're trying to build with the community center. A place that's not just about food, but about connection, about building something real. I think you could be a great fit." A sense of warmth spread through Sarah's chest as she listened. For the first time in a long time, she could see a way forward, a way to turn her dreams into something tangible. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something bigger than she had ever imagined. Weeks passed, and Sarah's life began to shift in ways she had never imagined. The city, once an intimidating unknown, was now a place where she was carving out her own path. She had started working at the community center alongside James, helping to plan and launch culinary programs that would eventually become the heart of the center. What had begun as a chance encounter, a mistaken seating, had blossomed into something beautiful, something Sarah could never have predicted. The partnership was more than just professional. Over time, she and James had become friends, confidants even. They spent hours discussing not just food, but life, parenthood, their dreams, their challenges, and their triumphs. They laughed about their kids and shared stories about the past that made them feel like they had known each other forever. Sarah had never expected to find someone who understood her the way James did. One sunny afternoon, Sarah found herself sitting at a small cafe near the community center, sipping her coffee as she reflected on everything that had changed in her life. Emma was at a local park with friends, and Sarah had the rare moment to herself. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from James. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation last week. I think you're ready for the next step. I want to offer you something bigger. Let's talk soon." Her heart raced as she read the message. She had always dreamed of running her own restaurant, but never truly believed it was possible. Not without a huge investment or the right connections. But James had proven time and time again that the world worked in mysterious ways, offering opportunities when you least expected them. Just as she was about to reply, another message came through. "Meet me at the community center in an hour. I think I've found something that could change everything." The excitement bubbling up inside her was almost too much to contain. She quickly finished her coffee, grabbed her purse, and made her way to the center, her mind racing with possibilities. What could it be? Was this the opportunity she had been waiting for? When she arrived, James was already there, waiting for her with a big smile on his face. He motioned for her to follow him into one of the center's large kitchens, where they had been working together to design the cooking classes. "You've been doing amazing work here," James said, his voice warm. "I can see the impact you're having on this community, but I think it's time to take this a step further." He opened a folder in front of her, and Sarah's eyes widened as she saw the details. It was an official proposal, a plan to open a new restaurant, one that would be part of the community center, serving as both a place for people to gather and a training ground for aspiring chefs. "I've been talking to my investors," James continued, "and we want to make this a reality. You will be the head chef. We'll give you the space, the funding, and the resources. All you have to do is bring your vision to life." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was more than just a job. This was a dream she had been chasing for years. Only now it was real, it was tangible, and it was within her grasp. I don't know what to say," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. She could hardly believe it. After everything, after the struggles, the mistakes, the uncertainty, this moment felt like a dream. James smiled softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that this is your time. You've earned this." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she looked at the proposal again. This wasn't just about food. It wasn't just about running a restaurant. It was about creating something that mattered. It was about making a difference, not just in her life, but in the lives of those around her. It was about showing Emma that no dream was too big to pursue, no matter how impossible it seemed. "You've already changed my life, James," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd be here, working with you, having this chance." "Thank you." James nodded, his expression sincere. "It's all you, Sarah. You've always had the potential. You just needed someone to believe in you. And I always will." Over the next several months, Sarah threw herself into the project with everything she had. The restaurant began to take shape, both physically and conceptually. The kitchen became a place of innovation, where Sarah experimented with recipes that celebrated diverse cultures, bringing people together through the power of food. The training programs flourished, and Sarah watched as young chefs learned and grew, inspired by the same passion that had driven her to pursue this dream. And through it all, Emma thrived, too. She loved the community center, the friends she had made, and the stability that Seattle had brought them. Sarah's new life had become a place of growth, not just for her, but for her daughter as well. They had found a home, not just in the city, but in each other. One evening, as Sarah stood outside the restaurant, looking at the soft glow of the sign above the door, she felt an overwhelming sense of pride. This was her dream, her achievement, and it had come true against all odds. The past was behind her, and the future was wide open, full of possibilities. James walked up beside her, his face glowing with satisfaction. "You did it," he said simply. Sarah smiled, her heart full. "We did it." And for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. The future was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace. Together, with Emma by her side and James supporting her every step of the way, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning of a brand new chapter, one filled with love, laughter, and endless opportunity. They had created something beautiful, a family, a community, and a place where dreams could come true.